Hey, folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskering Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be welcoming on a guest whose company I've actually been talking to for a couple of years now. I got to see them back in 22 at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival when I was down there. And it's been a long time coming, and I'm really happy we made it happen. So please welcome on with me Francesco Viola from Luca Mariano Distillery. The distillery is in Danville, Kentucky, but Francesco is joining us from his home in northern Michigan. So, Francesco, welcome on.
Thanks, David, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I think the first intro I got to Luca Mariano was I don't even remember at this point if there was a reach out via email or if kind of bottles just arrived on my doorstep, which either one happens sometimes, and I'm never quite sure. But can't wear them. I was intrigued by the story of this Italian heritage, which is not one frequently seen in the distilling scene, I would argue, at least in America. Uh, so but you did have some distilling in your past. So with that, I wanted to just give you an opportunity to tell the origin story of Luca Mariano Distillery, including the initial distillation that you had in 2010.
Perfect. Yes. So my family has a rich history in distilling, and back in the early part of the 1900s, my great grandfather Baldassare Viola, he came over to America, and he was here illegally. And his job that he had at that time was distilling, and then he got sent back home because he wasn't here legally, and then in 1920, when Prohibition began, he got a knock on his door. My parents are from Bellestrade, Sicily, which is not too far from Palermo. And he got a knock on his door, and the Sicilian mafia said, "Hey, we need you to go to Ontario, Canada, to run our distilling operation there." And so then that's where he went. He left the family, moved to Ontario, and ran stills during Prohibition, and later he became legal and came to the United States legally. And then my family came over in the late 60s, early 70s, and then I was born in the late 70s. So I never got to meet Baldassare. I got to meet his wife. She outlived him, but I got to really learn from my grandfather, his son, how to distill in the 80s. I was about 7 years old when I first started distilling, learned how to grow tomato plants, can tomatoes, do a bunch of things in our family. And it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that time with my grandfather. His name was Mariano, and that's part of where the name comes from. My son's name is Luca Mariano. That's his middle name. And so you got Luca and then Mariano, my grandfather. And we really we really built our bond together, distilling together and doing other things. And he and I were very close. And then in 1999, he passed away. And the one thing that he gave to me was his distilling equipment. And then, I was just starting my life, graduated from Michigan State University in 1999, first Viola to graduate from college. And so it was a big deal. And so I was focused on building my career and working. And then in 2010, I decided to take his distilling equipment out, and I was smoking meat at the time. I was really into barbecuing and smoking meat, and so I was kind of doing these activities on the weekends, and it was a lot of fun. And then I really started to get passionate about it, and just I turned my garage into a full blown, small mini distillery. I had 8 fermenters going around the clock, and I did that for a few years. And then I decided, well, you know what? I'm going to get my license. I found out during this time from a neighbor. He's a sarcastic type of guy. He's always, giving me a hard time, and which is fun, playful banter. But I didn't believe him at first that it was illegal to distill in your garage because I mean I had been doing it my whole life, and why would this be illegal, you know? But I asked my attorney Matt, and he confirmed, yep, it's illegal to distill in your garage. So I asked Matt to get me a license, and we went through that process, and then in I guess it would be New Year's Eve of 2013. I think that's when we got our license. So at 11 a.m. on New Year's Eve. So we're about a week away from celebrating that that anniversary. But we had so after we got our license, I decided to step things up. I was able to work with a guy I met at uh, Moonshine University, which I was the second graduating class of Moonshine University in 2013. And his name was Ross Caldwell. He worked with Whiskey Thief. He owned Whiskey Thief at the time. And so he let me use his distillery, ran several much larger batches there, and really kind of perfected what we were doing. I did a soft launch in Nashville in 2014. I had at that time I owned a bar there, which thought I was going to make Tennessee whiskey for a little bit. I had a beautiful bar that was right on the river there downtown on Second and Broadway, where all the action is today. And so was going to do that, and good thing that didn't work out. We had, uh, I'm glad first of all to be in Kentucky. I'm glad our journey took us from Michigan to Tennessee to Kentucky. But where we would have had our bar and where we would have had approval, believe it or not, at that time was crazy. We had approval to put 5 to 6 thousand barrels in our bar, which in a downtown area, which was crazy. I don't know how we got that, but that they allowed
Yeah.
us to do that. And that area there got blown up on Christmas Eve a few years ago. So I mean, just think if something bad would have, if we would have been successful with Tennessee whiskey, you know, part of Nashville would have been burnt down. So we got lucky there. But we ended finding our way to Danville. We found a real estate agent. His name is Dan Campbell, which we named our first rickhouse after. He helped us find the perfect piece of property. And I asked Dan from Danville, I said, hey, help me find a piece of property. So we started off in Danville. We went all the way to Bardstown, Louisville, Frankfurt, Lexington, all the way back to Danville. And we saw everything. We spent weeks looking at every single farm that was for sale and farms that weren't for sale. And but I was drawn to the farm in Danville. And so that really worked out. It wasn't for sale. We asked the owner if they'd sell it to us, and we pieced together several pieces of property to build what we have. We have 553 acres on our farm currently, looking to expand it as time goes on. We have great stories that are on the property. There's the oldest stone home in Kentucky is the William Crowe Stone House, which we'll build a brand around that at some point in the future. We have, and he actually had, it was just printed recently in one of the distilling books that William Crowe had a license to distill, one of the first licenses in Kentucky back in the early 1800s. So there's a lot of history of distilling on our property. During Prohibition, you have Guy Jones. He had a prop plane. I mean, think about it. We're in 1920 and a guy has a plane in his backyard in a runway. But what he would do is in the silo that we have on our property still has broken scraps of his still. He would cook and distill in there and kind of have it as a decoy being in a silo. And the way it was structured, the smoke wouldn't just go straight up. It kind of puff out the sides. So you couldn't really tell that what he was doing. But he would deliver his spirits throughout from like Kentucky to the north, going all the way up into Ontario. And he would, as a decoy, he would land somewhere. He would drop off his packages, to whoever he was selling it to, and then he would give dollar rides to kids and to families. And so it was a decoy. But the cool thing is there's no real documentation, but my great grandfather was in Ontario and there's documentation of him going to Ontario to pick up more product and then delivering on his way home and refueling. So kind of neat. They may have met. I mean, it was much smaller world back then than it is today. There's less people. So it's just kind of a neat story that the property has a rich history dating back all the way to the early 1800s. And so we'll be telling those stories. And Guy Jones has tunnels throughout the property from the house to the silo, exiting the house. And we're going to be renovating those at some point. and having that be part of our tour. So that's something to look forward to down the road. But now we're getting ready to open up tours here in the new year in 2025, and it's gonna be fun. Everyone thought when I was building that I was going to be bringing Tuscany to Danville, and I said no, we're not going to do that. We're going to build something that's appropriate for Kentucky and for Danville, and our style of rickhouse and our style of our distillery kind of models Tobacco Barn, which tobacco was a big part of our farm for many
Mhm.
years, but it also has a function too. So there's first the function and then the style. And so the rickhouse has four times more windows than other distilleries, and it's modeled after, you know, Heaven Hills, Deatsville rickhouses, the cake style, which I really studied those guys. I admired what they're doing and wanted to, be different, not be them. We'll have our own, value in the industry, but I feel like they're doing a lot of things right. And I looked at what they were doing, and their best stuff, I believe, comes from those rick houses. So we looked at it, brought in engineers, and we copied some things that you see in in Key West before air conditioning, where there's a lot of air movement. You create this attic where the air kind of comes through the building and then goes through the attic naturally, and then and it just creates massive airflow. And that's the most important thing when distilling or when you're aging is the airflow. You got to have um um uh can you hear me still?
Yep. Sorry.
Oh, you can?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they my computer keeps doing something. Sorry. So not
It's
to
okay.
not to get off track there, but it's making noises, so I thought maybe you couldn't hear me.
Nope. All good.
So the rick house, what we did, the design of it allows you to age the product a little bit faster and give you a little bit more in-depth flavor during the time it's aging. And so that airflow is very important, very key. And even though the first floor is always going to be a little bit cooler than the top floor, the difference in heat is a little bit less than your traditional style rick house, so that you really have sweet spots throughout the entire building, and you have very little. There's We haven't found one barrel yet that doesn't meet our requirements. So far, the theory works that there's not a bad spot or a cold spot in our distillery or in our rick house. So that's great. But yeah, so we're very excited. We're very happy. There's a lot of cool things we're going to be showing our guests when they come by. And when people were asking, "Are you bringing Tuscany to Danville?" I no, we're keeping the traditions of the American culture in Danville, except we're going to kill everybody with Italian hospitality. So that's the angle that we're coming from, where where everybody's going to really enjoy what we have to offer because we're going to do things with a hospitable way, like if you were in Italy. So, um, and I think everyone's going to enjoy that. Lots of drinking. I mean, not in a bad way, but lots of drinks, lots of food, lots of, warm, you know, energy. It's just exciting music, stuff like that. Keep people happy. Because how can you not be happy coming to a distillery, correct?
Hey, no, I agree. Even
Got to keep that going.
distilleries, yeah, even distilleries where I haven't necessarily liked the products, I I still maintain even there, everything tastes better at a distillery. Everything feels better at a distillery.
Right.
That's why I have to taste things at home because otherwise everything would get a good rating. So
Yep.
uh, with there's a couple points that I'm definitely going to come back to throughout the interview. One of them, of course, being those warehouses. Also, your initial start. I do want to ask just quickly. People ask you if you're bringing Tuscany to Kentucky. Do you ever take a moment to correct them? Like, look, family's originally from Sicily. We're in northern Italy for a little bit, but I almost don't consider Tuscany northern Italy in a way, like the northern half, but not.
No, no, it's I would say Tuscany is more in the center. Like,
Yeah, it's central. Yeah.
yeah, more center. I mean, it's maybe not legitimate considered center in Italy. Maybe it's like the northern center or the southern northern part, but it's to me it's center, more
Yeah,
center
like
Italy.
it's north of Rome, but
Yeah, it's
it's
far
there's a lot
from
more farther north than that. So
yeah, it's far from Sicily. And Sicily is very different than that part of Italy. So,
yes, even southern Italy is different from Tuscany. We're taught this is just a side tangent on my own history, which is I was taught Italian for 5 years. Can't speak it. Still, I can read it, but can't speak it. And when I went there, when you're in Tuscany and Rome and kind of the more touristed areas, you can speak the Italian they taught you in school, and everything's fine. I go south to Bari, and nope, and
whole
whole
other
different
thing.
whole different language. And from what I've heard, Sicily is almost literally its own language because of all of the different cultures that have been there and the different influences that it has. So the culture of Sicily, I've been to Italy multiple times now. I've never made it down to Sicily. I would love to at some point just to see and to visit a different culture.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
Sicily's great, and the food there is the best. I mean, all of Italy has great food, can't go wrong, but they just do things differently there, and it's in the desserts. If you like desserts,
mhm.
you've never had a cannoli before or a cassata cake or certain things that you may, get your hands on in New York or other parts of the country. But when you go there and you actually have it made there, it's absolutely amazing.
I bet.
So.
I bet. So the one of the first questions I had was that that initial distillation that you did in Nashville in 2014 or so. Um, as you said, eventually you moved to Kentucky. Actually, shortly after you moved to Kentucky and continued your path there. Besides what you said about, obviously there were potentially zoning questions that someone might ask, not on your part, on the city's part or the state's part. Besides that, though, what else kind of led into the decision of Nashville? It's definitely growing. It's becoming what it is today, which is this Bachelorette Central and Nash Vegas. But Kentucky is the place that we really need to be. Tell me a little bit more about that decision.
Yeah, so going back even further, I own a small piece of property in Michigan. So I originally thought I was going to make Michigan straight bourbon until
Mhm.
somebody said that word to me, and I'm like, that doesn't make much sense. Michigan straight bourbon. So I abandoned the idea of making our bourbon in Michigan. And then I started looking, and I was doing a lot of business in Nashville. I was in Nashville quite a bit. My main business that pays for everything is a screen printing business. We create heat applied transfers, and you screen print on paper and you heat apply it on the garments. And I do a lot of work in the Nashville area and so I would be there a lot. And I saw that the city was transforming from 2005 to 2013, 2014. And so I thought, well, this would be the perfect time to get in while things are starting to turn for the better. And even though I was born in America and American, having deep Italian roots, you don't always see things as clear until you live it and live through it. So at the time, I enjoyed Jack Daniels and other forms of whiskey. And so I thought Tennessee was going to be a really great spot for us to build a distillery. And then, you know, I feel like there's some divine intervention along the way because I had my heart set on Nashville, but just things didn't work out. And I would have been, selling Tennessee whiskey rather than American, bourbon. But it just didn't work out. Like there's not a really a good answer. It just the bar and everything that we were putting together, just things fell apart. And then it brought me to back to Kentucky. And at that time, I was making product in Kentucky at Whiskey Thief. So I wasn't even making Tennessee whiskey yet. I was making Kentucky, bourbon whiskey. So it was um I was still, without realizing it, still in Kentucky, but trying to move to Tennessee. So I just kept getting held back. So then I, after that didn't work out, that's when I was like, I'm starting to learn a little bit more. We did a couple shows in Tennessee because we were distributing at that time. And I met with the guys, they were next to us. Gosh, I can't think of their name right now. Um, they're right next to Heaven Hill, up above. Shoot.
Oh,
Um, it starts
is it
with
Will it?
W. Will it? Yes. Yeah, sorry. Hopefully edit that part. So
Yeah, that's fine. That happens all the time to me. So I'm glad it happened to someone else for once. So
yeah, I mean I know who Will it is. It just, I'm having a little cold up here. My brain's freezing. But but no, I was talking with the guys from Willet and we were just, going through some things and I learned something from them at that moment in time that, you know what, I want to take things up a notch and I want to be elevated and respected. And the only way to do that is to make a good quality Kentucky straight bourbon and Kentucky straight rye. And it has to be done in Kentucky. And then, how things worked out. I mean, what better place to be than in the center of Kentucky, right in the middle, and in Danville. And so everything kept, bringing me back. And I look at Danville as being the bullseye, of Kentucky. It's our bullseye. It's been a really great place to be. The people there have been very welcoming. We've had a lot of great success and with everybody there, and I'm really happy to be able to bring something special to the community and uh, and and do what we're doing there. So,
and just
hopefully that
to
answers your question.
yeah. And just to add in one more facet to the where question, you said before that you considered for a moment doing a Michigan straight bourbon. Now, we've had a couple of producers from Michigan on the show now, but obviously, when at the time when you're talking about, even some of those distilleries hadn't started yet, and there were just a couple in Michigan at the time. So there wasn't really a proof of concept, if you will, that a Michigan distillery could survive long term, could produce a Michigan bourbon, Michigan rye, Michigan whiskey, and be successful. Um, so 10 plus years later, the answer to that is yes, you can. We can make Michigan bourbon, Michigan whiskey, and very good whiskey at that. Um, Even with the success that you've had already in Kentucky, the welcomingness of the community, everything that fitting into place. Have you had any thoughts, just looking back now, being like, Michigan could have worked out. Might have been a little tough, but it could have worked out.
I haven't really put much thought to that, but now that you say that, there, you know, it may have worked out in Michigan. I just had once I got focused on Kentucky and I had I gave myself my own marching orders. I just was focused 100% on what I was doing. But now that you say that, yeah, I mean, I think we could have made something possible. It would have been possible to build something in Michigan. It would have been in Plymouth in between uh, Detroit and Ann Arbor, kind of right there in the middle, a little bit closer to Ann Arbor than to Detroit, but great spot. Would have been used to be an apple orchard, the property I owned like 100 years ago. But it's still a great spot. I mean, I do have a Michigan DSP number and I do have a Kentucky DSP number, so maybe maybe you're onto something. Maybe I can build something smaller in Michigan one day.
Multi-state blends are becoming more of a thing, and there's a lot of interest to be found there. So just had to ask that question, because otherwise I'd be getting a question or two from my Michigan guests, Michigan listeners, being like, I don't think what he said. So just covering, I'm
Well, no,
CYA
no,
for both of us
it's
on that.
it's a great idea. Like, I mean, Michigan's my home where I lived my whole life. So, I mean,
Sure.
I love Michigan, and I'm not saying anything disrespectful to it. It was just, when
Yeah.
you're thinking about bourbon, you think of Kentucky. And I know that nowadays people are starting to see that you can make a different type of expression in different places, and that's great. But I think at the end of the day, and like what we've built at our distillery is the old fashioned way of making bourbon from like the beginning of bourbon making years, and brought modern technology to that. So like we really wanted to go back to the traditional way of doing things, and which my great grandfather called the old Americano way of distilling, and like we have a product called Old Americano, and as a result, and so we kind of call our way of making bourbon the Old Americano way. But we do have, it's fully automated. We have sensors that you can even follow on your phone if you want to see, if certain things are running the way you want it to be. But it's a fully technologically advanced, and we have, you know, a great chemistry lab as well, so we can always monitor and make sure everything's to the highest level of our satisfaction. But we're doing things a little bit slower, doing things the old-fashioned way, and that's where you get the flavor. If you're cooking a pasta sauce, and you can make a nice pasta sauce in 30 minutes and, really put it together. But if you let it simmer all day, it's going to be full of flavor and have a lot more depth to it. And that's kind of what we're doing with our distillery. We're taking our time. We're not pushing gallons per minute out of there. We're trying to, let each batch um, come to where we want it to be without putting, limitations on there of time and certain things. So it's it's different than I think most people. Most people are trying to push gallons per minute. And we're also working with, we have the largest recorded well in Kentucky. And that's one of the main reasons why we decided for Danville, because there was other farms we liked. But we saw that there were fractures on the property where looked like there'd be large reservoirs of water. And we tapped into one of those, and it's now the largest recorded well in Kentucky, which is great because it's a deep well, and it's got good clean limestone water, whereas a lot of the newer distilleries nowadays are using city water, and you can read about that, with Bardstown trying to limit that water supply,
Mhm.
and there is a difference. If you use city water with all the chemicals in it, it will come out different. Still can taste good, but there is a difference when you're using limestone water. It does taste better, and it is a
Yeah.
smoother, more in-depth product. And so that was a big deciding factor for us was the water supply. And then we have an area where we have a pond, and one day we'll turn that pond into a 16-acre lake. And then that will also be part of our distilling process too. So that'll also be beautiful because you got to have things that make sense, function first, but you also got to have the make it look pretty. So that
Mhm.
also make things look pretty on the property as well.
And to me, that's it's something that was mentioned in other interviews as well. This idea of, and I think it's a very, to me, it's a very Italian sensibility. This sense that yes, it has to be a good product, but it's also got to be aesthetically pleasing. And by product in this case, you're talking in that in that interview it was specifically about the whiskey, but I'm hearing it also about the property, about what you're going to be attracting people to the property with. You want it to look good. You want people to be taking pictures there, want to visit there, want to come there potentially with their families, not even just because of the whiskey. So that all to me comes together very cohesively. Uh, I think that's a good segue into also your your process and your team. So as you said, you got one of the most advanced automated systems in certainly in Kentucky, if not in greater areas. But you've also got both David Phillips, master distiller. He came on as he was announced during the 22 KBF, I think. As
That's correct.
yeah,
Yep.
so you got him, and then just very recently, Amanda Kaufman, who was formerly at Makers, joining as a chemist. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about David, about Amanda, how you came to pull them in, and how you think about building a team.
So the cool thing about when we built our team is we didn't advertise. We didn't put anything out there that we were hiring. Um, we, just people I've known in the industry. It's we're in 2024 right now, and I've been doing this since 2010. So I've gotten around and I met a lot of people. So I had my eyes set on a few people that I really wanted to be part of our team, and then as we were, uh, as time went on, I got introduced to other people. But everybody that works for me has been hand selected by me and a few other people that I work with, and we're couldn't be happier. They're all extremely talented, really good at what they do, passionate, and they come from, some of the best distilleries in our industry. I mean, David Phillips, he ran the Booker No plant for several years, I think 13 to
Mhm.
15 years, somewhere in that range. And then he got hired on by Bullet to run their distillery for about 5 years. So you got Jim Beam, you got Bullet, Diageo, you have Maker's Mark with Amanda. We have guys from Wilderness Trail that work for us, and handful of other distilleries. And they're all great, and they all bring different perspectives. But the one thing that's really great about everybody that works for me is, I was able to communicate how I'd like to do things and how I would like to approach the industry from a different angle, and they're all open to it, even though they may have come from an area where they had a box that they had to be within. They came and they opened the lid to that box, and they were willing to expand that box or even get rid of it and try and push things a little bit differently. So we've been very fortunate. We have wonderful people on our team, and they have a lot of energy, and they're very excited to tackle some new things. And our industry is changing, and there's there's a American malt just got defined last week, and
Mhm.
we have a 10-year product that's a bourbon, but it's 51% corn, and the balance is malted barley, and that's won all sorts of awards. It's really great. And, now that we can push the boundaries and maybe go to 100% malt, we've been talking about some things, and we already had it in our schedule. We're making that this week, with a twist. It's going to be really something special. So they're all excited about it. And it's just, we have different ways of approaching the industry, and we're excited to try and bring new things to the industry. And we building a smaller distillery. I mean, it's still much to me, it's a large distillery, but it's much smaller than a lot of the newer ones out there. Uh, we each batch will do roughly 25 barrels. So you're not committing to hundreds of barrels per batch, you're committing to 25.
Mhm.
And so that gives us a little bit of flexibility to play around with some mash bills.
And that 5149, that's the Gianna Loren, right?
No, that's my
That's the
signature.
oh, it's
My
signature.
my signature, yeah.
So I, as I said, I've known the brand for a bit. I was looking through the brand. I think the only two that I hadn't tried were at that signature must have been one of them then, and the Gianna, because that the Gianna came out after I initially uh, spoke with the brand, got introduced and all that to the products and stuff. So I'm gonna make it a point to try to grab one of those too, just to see. I want to see where you've come.
Yeah,
You know.
the Gianna Run has really people love it. It's kind of turned out to be the fan favorite in many ways. It's uh it's it's 45% corn and basically 55% rye. And so it's people just like it. It drinks kind of like a bourbon, but it's a rye. It just has different um characteristics of it than just 95.5 rye,
Right.
or a rye bourbon. So it's really been um uh you know quite successful for us. The Gianna Rim we kind of held off because we already have a lot of brands out there that we released. So we wanted
Mhm.
that to age and to be a certain age. And we do have the Gianna Run bourbon is a wheated bourbon, which we just haven't ever introduced it, because we have a lot of brands. So once the distillery and we have people coming, we'll probably have the wheated just at the distillery for now. And I think
Okay.
that's this year is 7 years. I think it's gonna be 6 or 7 years this year. We would have had 10-year product because we made wheat from the beginning, but I sold 4 years of our bourbon barrels to help buy the farm. So so I had to do certain things and I I'm not bound by a non-disclosure agreement, but I figured out where those barrels went, and Total Wine, they bought those barrels and they won some awards with that. So it's something to be on the lookout for one day. So
I love when those stories can actually be told because NDAs, I get their purpose, but they suck for storytelling purposes. So, um,
yeah, we're gonna try to be
yeah.
very open as much as we can be, but and when we do contract distilling, I have no secrets about it. And I want part of the hospitality that the Italian hospitality is whoever we contract distill for, our distillery is their distillery. They can come, they can bring people, bring guests, they can walk around freely around our distillery. It's our house is your house. We want to be very, open and hospitable. So, we can even put their name up and they can come and, feel like it's a part of what they're doing as well. So,
Nice.
and and when I was making my product after Whiskey Thief, I started making it Wilderness Trail.
Mhm.
And Wilderness Trail made their first 40 barrels, and then the next 240 barrels were my barrels. And in the early years, they allowed me to be there and be a part of it. And I was making it with their team and I was leading the way. But then we know their success story. They got real big, they started doing really well. And then I wasn't allowed to do that anymore about 4 or 5 years into it. So, but it was okay. It still worked out.
I was
But
going to ask because I saw the growth over the first few years was tremendous. 240 barrels the first year or two, and then 480 in 2017, 750 in 2018. Close. You're planning at least 1,000 for the next year, so the growth was there. But I hear you in that. Pat and Shane, they're fantastic guys. They've been on uh, at least once, but not twice now I think about it. And they're mentioned quite often because of both the distilling side, but also firm solutions. So, but I get that at a certain point, people are going to get kind of sized out, if you will, which is unfortunate. What happens, but now you've got your own contract capacity, which is fantastic. One more thing I just wanted to ask about the automation and the staff is that you have this automated system, but you've also got people who have significant credentials and experience. So for you as an owner, as the founder, the person who wants their distillery to be represented and presented in a certain way, where do you want them to draw the line between technology and science and the art of distilling?
so, I mean, so you want to know like where you draw the line between science and the art of distilling? I mean, so the main thing is we want to always be distilling with the art of distilling. It's always got to be the old way of distilling, the way it was done back in the day. But how we monitor that through chemistry and how we monitor that through modern technology will allow us to see if there's something that's slipping or something that's not going the way we want it. A fermentation isn't taking off the way it should, or certain things aren't happening the way we would like it. We're then notified, and then we can make adjustments. Um, but it's more of just using what we have now that we're in the future and making sure that every batch comes out consistently the way we want it and having pretty much zero tolerance for for failure. We don't want to dump, a batch because it didn't go right. We want to be able to rescue it if we can. And so I mean mainly we're keeping the principles of the old Americana way of distilling, but but watching it along the way. And you don't want contamination as an example. I mean, if you have contamination, it might still slip by, might still get, distilled, but then it might have a funky taste, and nobody wants that. After
Yep.
5 to 10 years of aging, you spend all that time and energy and you bottle it and you're like, huh, that didn't really work out very good. So those are the things we're trying to avoid. And we're not into the flavor whiskey, so we don't want to take a bad barrel and flavor it so that we disguise, the bad taste in
Yep.
it. And most of what we do is a single barrel, and I think that's going to be what we do well into the future. And so each barrel is going to be unique and have its own flavor, but we want to put the best possible juice inside going into it so that when it comes out, it has the flavor profiles we want. And you can't hide a bad barrel in a single barrel. You can
Nope.
maybe hide it in a batch, but maybe even a small batch, but you can't really hide a bad barrel in a single barrel.
No. And yeah, even in batch and even in large batches, I've been, God, this is my fourth year podcasting. I think one of the first things I learned was initially that the only thing you couldn't blend out would be mustiness in a barrel. And I think I agree. I think a second thing needs to be added. You can't blend out contamination. Like if you've got a barrel that goes sour, that some vegetation gets in, something goes wrong there. You can blend out over oaked or under oaked. You can blend out other things, but at a certain point, those barrels just need to go. But to your point, if you're mostly doing single barrels, it's it's easier to at once let that see if you can rescue it. There's also less of a loss if you decide, all right, this barrel is just it's contaminated. There's just no way of saving this one. It's not as much of a loss if you've already as it would be if you had already brought it into a blend where there's multiple barrels at a time. So one of the themes that kind of keeps coming up in my mind and through the timeline is transitions. So you've had the transition from the home distillation to legal distillation, from Michigan to Tennessee to Kentucky, uh, from Nashville to Danville, from Whiskey Thief to Wilderness Trail, and now to your own distillation, which, as of recording, you started cooking and mashing just this past week. So this is brand new. It's happening. It's real. Uh, and sorry, one more change that I thought of, which was I think for most of the distillery's history, you'd been using ISC char 4 barrels, and then I saw I think just yesterday a reel of the first Kelvin barrels coming in.
That's right.
Uh, so that's so we'll get a little bit more into that too. But so there are a lot of different changes that have taken place over the course of the brand, of the production style, of all these different things. How have you managed to create a fairly consistent product throughout all of these transitions?
So the product that we have now is all with Cooper Select barrels from Independent Stave. And so what that means is our wood was aged for 18 months and then assembled and then it was char number 4. My goal all along was to work with Calvin Cooperage. To me, they really have perfected the art of barrel making. And what we did was we still worked with a great product. There's nothing wrong with what we have and what Independent Stave does. I mean, most of what everybody drinks comes from Independent Stave. They're quite a large,
Pretty
cooperage.
big, yeah.
But what I'm looking for is taking things to the next level with our distillery and being a craft distillery. And the things that I'm able to do with Calvin is a little bit different than what I could do with Independent Stave. Independent Stave has always been great to me. They're good people, but I'm probably their smallest customer or one of their smallest customers. So to do something special for me is very different than working with Calvin Cooperage, and they've been very accommodating. We've gone over many different things I'd like to do with our barrels and different um, um, mash bills that we plan to put together, and they've helped me dial in and customize things that I can only do there. I mean, it's and the way they assemble the barrels, which is really, important, and with the style of rickhouse that we have, what's really important is having with their barrels, we're going to have less loss, less angel share. The way they assemble it, they're tighter. There's very little to no leaks ever, and the way it's assembled, and with our airflow that's going through our rickhouse, we should be able to maintain higher levels of whiskey and retainage in our barrels than what we've had in the past. And not that there's anything wrong with what we're in industry standards, but with their barrels, it's going to allow us to get more flavor and more whiskey yields at the end. And so all around, it's going to be it's a good fit. And I can call them anytime, talk to them. I can even change what I want the day that they're making it. I mean, they're very flexible with me, and that's what's important when doing the things that we plan to do and what we are doing with our craft distillery.
And this ties back in my mind to the choice of rickhouse design as well. If you have a rickhouse that perhaps favors a slightly faster maturation, especially with all of the windows, with the attic structure and the 3 tier. On the flip side of that, you'd also want a barrel that is as tight as possible because you're going to have more angel share. Otherwise, you're going to have more evaporative loss and barrel interaction. So if you can have that barrel interaction, but keep it inside the barrel
It's
as
a
much as
guy,
possible,
right?
then you want that. And I totally agree with what you said. The industry standard is ISC. They're kind of like the Apple of like if barrels were mobile phones, they would be Apple.
That's
Most people
right.
have an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. But Kelvin was they were an early guest because I knew nothing about cooperages and I needed to learn that. So I had the folks from Kelvin on, talked about their process, which was a great. I remember that being a great interview. So when I saw anytime I see people working with Kelvin, I just like it because I know the work that they do, and it's like you said, it's just great barrel craftsmanship.
And that's what it comes down to is barrel craftsmanship. I mean, one thing that's different between their barrel and others is that they're not using gas when they're toasting or charring. They're actually building a fire with wood and then putting the barrel over it. And you don't want that gas introduced into the barrel. It will change and give it flavors that we're not looking for. And so when you're using, just like when we go to bottle our bourbon, we're not using air or some sort of chemical in our bottle. We're using the same bourbon we're bottling to rinse out the bottle. So I mean, it's the same idea with the barrel. If you're using the wood that it came from, the scraps, and then you're toasting it and then charring it, and when you do that, it's not a perfect science, and that's the art of cooking too. Like even though we have all these tolerances that we're trying to meet, we are letting certain things slip because we want flavor. So every single barrel has its own characteristic because you put it on the flame, it starts burning, and it's supposed to burn for 40 seconds, and that one might have burned for 60 seconds, even though we wanted it to be 40 seconds. It just happens that way. And so each barrel is going to be different, give different flavors, give different characteristics, and that's okay. That's what you want. You want everything to be a little different, but the same, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah,
So
different in the same within, like you said, within the tolerances of what you want the brand to and your products to taste like and be.
exactly. So so it's exciting. It's a really exciting time for us right now because we have been trying to build this distillery for about 8 years now, 6, 7, 8 years, and now that we're here, so we've had a lot of time, a lot of discussions for I mean, since I started in 2010, it's been almost 15 years now, but had a lot of discussions and talks, and now that we know exactly what we want to do, we know what we need to do, and we're just ready to just go make it happen. So it's exciting.
Fantastic. So in the last last third of our show that we've got you for, uh, let's hit on a couple of different things. So the first one is a slight detour, and I do want to say we haven't been going too deep into each of the products themselves, as we were saying, the old Americana, the Luca Mariano um, single barrels and such. Uh, that's kind of the way we do the podcast. We don't usually talk about individual products too much. It's more about the kind of grand overview. But I want to point out that the uh, Luca Mariano Distillery website, there's a ton of information on each of these products. I'm going to find my notes from tasting and bring those back as well. So there will be more information on the individual products themselves when this episode goes live. Just want people to know that I haven't forgotten that this is Whiskey Distillery and they are producing whiskey. Just got other questions that I know other people have gone into that thing and will continue to go into those. So I got to ask the different questions. Uh, so one of those, though, around the product itself is bottle design and aesthetics. Going back to that concept. Now you worked with flow design to create your bottle designs, labels, etc. Uh, I I'm not sure I've come across them before. Uh, I've come across just one or two design companies that work with bottlings and such, but flow design I haven't worked with. So describe them to me. Like, what's their process like? What's been working with them?
So so I have a little fun story about those guys. They're so when we were getting into the industry, this is early on in, before 2013, I'm trying to find someone to design bottles and all these things for me. And, we met with guys from California, I think somebody from the Carolinas, and like we were like, all excited about it. And then one day I came across Flow Designs and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I drive right by his office every day to go to work. And like literally, like it's right there on the corner that I drive by every day. And if I hang a left, I'll go pick up a Starbucks right a block away from his office. And I'm thinking, there's no way there's there's somebody local that can do this. But I decided to give him a chance. And Dan's great. He we have a lot in common, grew up in kind of the same area. He's a little bit older than me, but he went to Michigan State. I went to Michigan State University. So we had a lot in common. And so it's been a lot of fun building and designing with Dan and his other designer Dennis. Been great people to work with. But yeah, when we sat down, I I said I kind of painted a picture of what we're looking for, and and he brought it to life. I mean, we nailed it in my opinion. Like we have in the bottle design, there's consistent between each brand. There's these nice little V cuts that are in at the bottom, and my last name is Viola, so that kind of resembles the V for Viola, but also adds a lot of gives it a lot of aesthetically pleasing looks, especially when the water or not water when the bourbon comes down to to the end. It still makes the bourbon look nice and comes out. We took my family crest from Sicily that we have had in our family for a few hundred years, and we were able to design that into the bottle, which has been, it was very important to me, something that my grandfather Mariano would really wanted us to, carry on. And so that was really neat that we were able to put that on. But we have different brands and each bottle looks different and unique, but they look like a family, you know. If you have a brother or sister or mom or dad, you all look different, you're all different ages, different sizes. And but it was really important to us that everything looked like a family. And so we kept things throughout each bottle. We wanted my daughter's bottle. It's her name is Gianna Loren. That's her first and middle name. We wanted her bottle to be, masculine, but still feminine as a, to resemble a, for females. And we were really proud of Gianna Loren. It's it, I don't like to talk about it too much because it's people always beat me up on this, but it is the first female named bourbon. We trademarked that years before other bourbon female names out there. It's just we were making the product and it was sitting in barrels waiting for it to come of age before we made it to market. So those guys were able to beat us to market, but we had the trademark and the barrel's sitting there waiting to come to market. But it's among the first female named bourbons, and we felt like that was a really great thing to bring into the industry and to represent. And so each bottle, has a different price point. And one thing we're going to be getting aggressive with is with our old Americana line. We're going to be lowering the price next year to kind of make that more of a entry level, excessive or like more accessible. Can't say the word
Uh,
accessible, you know.
mm,
Um, but it's really important to us that people, no matter what their economics are or where they're at, or if they just wanted something to drink today that's not as expensive, and then something that's more expensive, they have that choice. But with the old Americana, our goal is to get somewhere between 29.99 to 34.99 in that range, depending on what market we're in, so that it's more easily, you know, available for everybody. And it's a 5 year, and that's the only small batch we do. It's 5 barrels small batch. And we do that for economic reasons. It's easier and less time consuming to bottle a little bit of a small batch, and then we were able to bring the price down. But it's still a very good quality product, 5 years and 5 barrels small batch. But yeah, the Flow Designs, he was easy to work with. He came up with concepts. He even did a 3D print of the bottles before we committed to it and did the mold. And he really listened and was able to do like small touches. Like the cork has my signature on it, which is kind
mhm.
of in its real cork, which is something that you see in Italy from a vineyard. You go to you get a wine bottle from somebody there, and they write their signature or put something on the cork, and he brought that to life. And so he's really helped us out. And even though I own a screen printing business and I have plenty of designers that work for me, he helped me design the t-shirt too that we have that says "Born in Italy, perfected in Danville, Kentucky." So he went across bottle design and label design and helped us with our t-shirts as well. And he did the he did the artwork for Dan Campbell's face on our rickhouse. He did the artwork for what will be on our distillery of my son and my grandfather, saying Luca Mariano. So it's you get a little bit more than just a bottle from him in the label. You get, it helps you out with other branding as well.
For sure. No, this is why I love when I can ask about the design questions, which it's not every episode, but whenever I can, because of those stories, you get how do people think about stuff. So, not knowing that story, I remember looking at the bottles and thinking there were two inspirations that came to mind from the just consumer perspective of it. One was the old Americano. Uh, it reminded me in a way of the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit bottles, the turkey tail, the fantail. Um, but more so the line itself, as you said, you want it to be recognizable as a family, even if there are slightly different bottle shapes and sizes and labels. It to me came off in a like an Art Deco meets glass minimalism, and I liked that. It was very streamlined. The V that you said works great for that kind of scalloped Art Deco idea, and I'm from New York. Art Deco is everywhere, so it's constantly
Right.
in my design vocabulary. But no, the bottles themselves, they were just aesthetically pleasing. They weren't ridiculous shapes. which I know means something for home bars. It means something for bartenders if you've got it at a bar, uh, where and like we'll throw out. We mentioned the Willet guys as really positive stuff before. I got to throw out that pot still bottle. Good product, but that bottle is impossible to put anywhere. um, like your
Yeah.
bottles can fit wherever they're going to fit, which is like something you have to think of in home context, bar context, on off premise. So, uh, but no, I really like that.
And that's an important point too, that when you work with a designer, you need to you need to trust that they know what they're doing because there's things you don't know. You don't even think about. Even though I bartended before, it's not like I didn't have any experience behind a bar. I wasn't thinking about the size of the bottle on the bar, wasn't thinking about the neck and the way it would pour and all these different things that are very important to bartenders and for them to do their job. And Dan at Flow Designs, I mean, he thinks about all those things. I mean, and Dennis, these guys, they know what to do, and they're looking out for you, even though you don't even know what to look out for, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So, but uh, but I've been very happy with those guys, and they've done a great job, and we have some other things that they're working on us for the future too. Some other exciting things. So, and that's the thing. Like if when we do contract distilling for other people, we have those connections, and we plan to explain that to people. If you need us to make introductions, we're there to help you and help you to be successful along the way.
It's a good transition to our kind of final segment, talking about the current and future Luca Mariano Distillery. So one of the things that you just mentioned that is going to be a big part of it, well, I'll let you tell me how big or small of a part of it's going to be, is the contract distilling part. Sorry, I'm still working my voice back, it seems. So uh, right now you installed a 18-inch copper continuous still from Vendome. You can do, I think it was about 15,000 barrels a
It-
year, something like that.
Between 15 and 18,
Yeah,
depending.
something like that.
It depends on how many. We're going to be barreling around 110 proof, so that's going to yield us more barrels per year. And
Right,
so
right.
we're probably going to be closer to 18,000 barrels with the way we're going to be barreling.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. And
yep,
that's a question I actually forgot before, which was entry proof, because I hadn't seen that one, but that was a detail. So thank you for
yep.
that. Uh, do you have in mind a set percentage of that capacity that's going to be this is set for Luca Mariano, um, and then contract is above that, or are you planning to be kind of flexible depending on your own needs and the demand from outside producers?
So so we had many ideas of what we were going to do as a distillery. Um, Back in 20, at the beginning of 2022, right before we were already breaking ground, and we actually were doing the pad for that as well. But then I changed my mind and pivoted. We had so much interest in contract distilling that I thought maybe I'd pivot and be a contract distiller. And so we actually have planned, we have a, where our parking lot is now was going to be a mega distillery with three 36-inch column stills.
Wow.
And I looked at it after the pad was done. I'm like, what are we doing? I mean, this is going against all of our plans and who we are as a company. We're not, I didn't get in this business to be a contract distiller. Got into it to be a quality brand and bring something different to the industry. And so I pivoted. I left that pad alone just in case maybe down the road we may expand our brand and may want to, revisit and build that big distiller at some point in time. So then I put beside it um, what what is now Luca Mariano Distillery. And we thought there was a couple of reasons why I picked an 18-inch column stills. The yields, I think, are more in line with what we feel our demand will be in the short term and long term. And also an 18-inch column still, it's widely known by a lot of distillers that to make the best quality juice. And that was really important to me. I really want our product to be put in a position where it can be the best it possibly can be. So we chose the 18-inch column still. And um, the goal is to do some contract distilling because I mean we've it would be nice to receive some money today while we're building, and I don't have any um venture capital behind me. I'm 100% owner. I don't have any other people financing this, so it would be nice to have a little bit of a bump for a few years with contract distilling, but we didn't build the distillery to be a contract distillery. We built it to make our own product. So I think we'll probably need to do contract distilling between 2 to 4 years, and then after that, it'll be solely for our company.
Gotcha. Interesting. All right.
So, I
Um,
mean, just you know, and if we do contract distilling for somebody and we build a nice relationship, we won't, just abandon them. We'll continue to work with them because once you're part of the family, you can't get rid of that little brother or little sister. You gotta keep them there. But I mean, we're not gonna do anything, to disrupt their business or hurt them. But the goal behind the distillery was to just build it for ourselves.
and another capacity question, but from the other end of the production spectrum, you have this 553-acre farm. You said in the opening, which answered one of my questions I was going to ask, which was it's 553 acres. Is that the maximum? You said you're open to expanding that if property becomes available, if the resources are there. Something to mention is you're growing all of your own grains.
That's correct. Yeah, we're growing our corn and our wheat on our property.
Right.
And for our,
So, oh, sorry.
yeah, so it's true. So part of the estate that we've built and I don't mean any disrespect to any other distillery, because a lot of them were built not thinking to have guests at their property, but and then it was the guests who came as an afterthought. But I really want to build, what I feel is the first bourbon estate, where it's like you come there, you have everything you need. You have shops, hotels, place to hang your hat, entertainment, food. We want to build an experience where people can stay there, for a few hours or spend a week there. And there's something that's fun for everybody in the family to enjoy. Um, Bourbon, yes, the main idea behind it, but there's other things that we can do. I know how to cook many different Italian dishes that many people have never heard of or seen, but they're really good. And so we'll be bringing some unique things that everybody will like because who doesn't like cheese or bread, but done differently maybe. And so we have a lot of cool things that we're going to bring. But one of the cool things is we want to do a vertical approach, and that's what we're working towards. We're we're farm to bottle. We're you take after not everybody may know this, but after you're done distilling, you have what a byproduct called stillage, and you've taken the sugars and turned that into alcohol, and then you take that alcohol and you put it in the barrels, but then you're left with, a sugar-free oatmeal, per se. So the only way to get rid of that is to feed it to cattle. That's the only way. That you can't throw it out on your field, you can't compost it, you can't put it down the drain, so you feed it to cows. And we have an area on our farm that currently has cows, and we're going to be expanding that at some point too. So then after we're done distilling, we have that stillage that then goes and feeds our cows, and then our cows will be processed, and then we'll feed our guests. So there's a whole circle of life that we want to show and demonstrate as part of our tours as well.
Yes, I like it. I like it. So, two final questions. I'm gonna kind of dip in tone a bit, and then we'll end on the high note, which is so. The first one is with all the discussion about Luca Mariano Distillery being a destination. visitor center, restaurant, food, the 16-acre pond as well. Um, it's hard to look at it this way, just in light of recent industry news. So in the last couple of months, we've had a couple of major companies go under. The one that comes to mind as most relevant here is, Kentucky Owl and Stoli. They were planning this huge amusement park and like Kentucky Owl Park or whiskey, whatever it was. Uh, that always seemed a bit crazy to begin with, just how crazy it was. But um, nevertheless, there is this sense that the industry is slowing down a little bit in general. The demand is kind of peaked for craft, and so things are contracting a bit. Perhaps it's a market correction. So, we'll see in the next couple of years how much it corrects or doesn't. Does any of this, do any of these trends or events happening around you have you rethinking or changing any of their plans for how you want to bring people to the distillery?
Of course. I call it a bourbon recession. A lot of people don't like to say that sort of thing, or bourbon crisis in some ways. And if the one thing that we've done is we're building a distillery for the long term, so you expect ups and downs. And my family, you know what they I grew up with a family that's in the construction business, and there's always, several good years and then followed by several bad years. So you kind of plan for that. And when so in that we've kind of planned for that. Um, did I think it ever get to be as bad as it is right now? I mean, not not right now. I mean, if you had asked any industry expert, I remember being at a party at Donald Blinko's house to build her a Buzick construction, and there was a bunch of people from all different distilleries, and this was like in 2020, and they're all saying that this was going to go on the boom until 2035, maybe even to 2040. I mean, they were like thinking this is never going to end. And here we are in 2024 and experiencing it much sooner than anybody would have ever thought of. But no, it's on my mind, but it's bourbon's not going anywhere. People have a taste for it. It tastes better now than it ever has. I mean, there's, things in the past that people may have shied away from because you know, they would only drink it to be mean to each other and say, "Hey, let's put hair on our chest." Oh, we're a tough guy. We can take that whiskey. But nowadays, I mean, it tastes really good. It's not going anywhere. People are going to drink it forever. Um, and it's just a hiccup a little bump in the industry, but it's going to come back. The thing that I see, and I probably shouldn't even mention it because maybe it's too controversial. The thing I don't like about the industry right now is that you have small guys like me that are really trying to do something special in the industry, and then you got all these big money guys coming from New York and Chicago and other places, and they're disrupting, you know, the industry. They're changing things in a way that I don't really like. Um, I mean, and you see, it's not it'll hurt people like me and other people like me in the short term. But in the end, if we can, stick it out and win and still stay in business, not me, but other people like me and stay are able to hang in there, we will win in the end. And what I mean by that is look at what's happening with like Red Lobster or TGIF or Chili's. All these restaurants are, with the exception of Red Lobster because it's a fish place, but all these restaurants are the exact same food, exact same menu, but coming from the exact same source, but it's uh just at a different marketed, restaurant. And those places aren't doing so well anymore. And these guys with money that come into an industry and I feel are the reasons why we are in this crisis. These guys have overinvested and invested in ways and maybe even caused this bourbon recession by pulling out and then selling things, for super cheap. But they're never ever going to be able to compete with a company like ours because we are not about money. It's not yeah, we have to make money to survive, but that's not why I'm in the business. That's not why other craft distilleries are in the business. We're truly in it to make a quality product, give a quality experience, and to then share that with the public. And so it's going to be a little bit of a battle. It's not going to be as easy as it could have been. Had we opened up a few years ago when everything was, you know, sunshine and rainbows, but you know, but it's not something that we can't overcome, and we plan to overcome and work through. And so we're very optimistic for the future. We don't think another category is going to replace bourbon. Some people think rum's the next hot item, but I just don't see that, or other types of products. I think now with the way bourbon has matured over the past, let's say 20 years, it's a drink that's not going to go away. Americans are going to continue to drink it. Canadians are going to drink it. Europeans are starting to drink it. People in Asia, and other parts of the world, and it's not going anywhere. It's just a little bump in the road.
I mean, with that last question, you've now got the distillery, you've mashing and cooking as of this week, the rickhouse is built, and this is all to say, with despite the experience you've had, you're still a young guy, uh, I think, and
Well, thank you.
you know, uh, and so you're still a young guy. Like you're not, to me, you're not near a point where you'd be retiring or passing on the distillery, but that still brings up the question of, now you've got all this, what uh do you intend your legacy to be?
So, the way the distillery is set up is it's set up in a type of trust so that it can be passed down um through generations. So there's the tax liability and all those things are figured out ahead of time so that, my kids can take the distillery and not have this tax burden and pass it on to their kids. So it's all set up in a way where I can pass it down um, for generations to come. My son, he uh, he has just side note, he has some allergies, and at the end of school last year, he couldn't go to school because of those allergies, and so he traveled with me from May, June, July, August for 4 months, and he saw and did everything I did for 4 months. And he's 16 years old now, and he's pumped, he's excited, and he's looking forward to the future of one day helping me run the company. My daughter, she's graduating this year. She has you know ideas of what she wants to do, and one day she plans to work for the company as well. So we it's set up to be a family business. It's set up to be, to live on forever. My goal was to tell the story of my family and our American dream, and that's really what we've built is the American dream of why my family came to America and the things that we came here to take advantage of. And it hasn't really been about me. It's more about me telling the story of my great grandfather, grandfather, my son, and then, the future. So I think maybe in the end, um, maybe just like a great artist, like great artists have, at once you pass on and die, then maybe they'll tell my story. But, at this moment in time, and it's more about my family and, you know, the other people, and I'm just going to continue to keep building that. So
Fantastic. Well, Francesco, thank you so much for coming on. Glad we finally got on the calendar to talk through Luca Mariano Distillery. I think it's the perfect time to have you on. There's so much going on, and I really look forward to you sharing with listeners and uh, what you do in 2025 when people can finally come to the distillery, when they can try some of those distillery only potential releases you talked about, and just get to experience it. You're right there in the Whiskey Triangle, easily available during any visit to Kentucky, and I guess I would highly suggest it. And I look forward to visiting on my own.
Yeah, it's you're welcome anytime. And one thing that we just did on December 5th for the first time, and it's real exciting, is we did with the Bourbon Brotherhood. They came, it's a big group, and they brought 10 guests, and we did a single barrel pick where they got to pick a single barrel. We went through that process. Then we had lunch together at the distillery. And then my team prepared it in the bottling line, and then they bottled their own single barrel and they took it home that day. So it was pretty exciting. So one of the unique things that we plan is if anybody wants to do a single barrel, they can come and pick a barrel, bottle it that same day, and have a nice 3 to 4 hour experience at our distillery and enjoy that process. And it was so much fun. And I'm glad those guys took a bus. Like they rented like they had a bus driver because they had a little more fun than I was expecting, but it was a good time. So, but
All in good fun.
well, when you come down, we'll at least let you bottle one bottle and take it home, or you can bottle as many as you'd like. So,
I appreciate that. Well,
yeah,
again, Francesco, thank you so much for coming on. Hang on with me for just a minute after we finish recording. This has been another episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Watch for the show notes where you can find all the information you need to find Luca Mariano Distillery on socials, on email, on the website, and where to buy as well. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next week.